Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be a little bit more shoulder focused, foot focused. We're going to spend a little bit of time in the half kneeling position. You're going to need a staff and a yoga wedge. Kind of like one of these. If you don't have a yoga wedge, you can do the movements that we're going to be using with the yoga wedge. You'll still get some good benefit from it. We're using it for mobilizing the foot. If you don't have one, this is a great tool. Highly recommend getting it. You can buy a pair of them for like $10. So, with all that, let's get started. Also going to be spending a little bit of time in the half kneeling position. Again, you can use the chair for a good amount of it. There will be one thing that I'll do in a lunge on the that's moving that the chair probably won't replicate as well, but otherwise you can use a thick pad underneath your knee if that helps, so that you can spend a little time in half kneeling. I do suggest spending a little bit of time in half kneeling, even if it has the potential to irritate the knees. Although I want to limit how long we're in half kneeling in order to not irritate the knees. But it's one of the half kneeling is a position that I think is a fundamental, foundational position that we need to be able to get into and out of. So it's important to place a little bit of stress of that position into the body in order to make sure that the body has the ability to utilize that position functionally. But it's a very fine line of enough for the body to be able to have the neurological and mobility potential to navigate through that position without causing problems, and doing so much that we irritate the knee or other joints, which make it harder to get into that position. So it's kind of a fine line. Just the right amount of stress, not too much stress. But it is important to apply some stress in the half kneeling position. So we're going to start in the standing position. Start with getting into our crocodile breath. So crocodile breath where we want to get that breath to move through our abdominal wall. And I want to think like a balloon. We want it to expand in all directions. So I want that breath to move forward into the belly, out through the low back, and out through the side walls of the abdominal wall. So we're going to use our hands as a kinesthetic cue in order to feel that expansion of breath. Placing hands around the midsection, below the rib cage and above the hip bone in that nice meaty section of the abdominal wall. Thumbs are wrapping around the back so that we can feel a little bit of that low back musculature. Index fingers are wrapping around the front so that we can feel a little bit of the abdominal wall musculature. And palms are pressing into the side to feel that side body musculature. And we're going to take nice inhales, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And as we inhale, I want to feel that breath pushing out and away in all directions on the hand. So I want to feel pressure pushing into the index fingers in the front, the thumbs in the back, and the palms out through the sides. And with each inhale, we're seeing how wide can we get that balloon to expand and blow up. As we exhale, clench the hands down lightly in order to create more resistance so you can feel that expansion pushing out. With each exhale, we're drawing our navel all the way up and into our spine, like you're trying to touch your spine, your belly button to your spine. And then immediately as you get that full exhale, fill that abdominal wall up. And we'll get a good 5 to 10 nice, slow, deep breaths. And as you're feeling these inhale breaths, start to notice, where do you feel that pressure in your hands on that inhale? Most people feel it well moving into the front, into the abdominals. but it's a little harder getting that breath to move out through the sides and especially hard into that low back. And what's going to be really interesting is noticing if it's different on the right side compared to the left side. Does one side move more and the other side doesn't move as much? That's something important that we want to work on. We want to bring more balance into that breathing apparatus so that we get a good inhale in both sides, expanding in all directions. We'll go ahead and let the hands soften. Now we're going to get into some shoulder mobility, focusing on bowls of soup. I want to start with the hands down low, extending the elbows fully, spreading the hands wide, turning the palms up as high as we can towards the ceiling. And we're going to do one arm at a time, going back and forth, spiraling, turning that palm all the way down and in. And I want that turn to rotate, to move all the way up the long bone. So as I spiral that palm down and in, I want to see how much can we get that ball of the humerus to spin inside the shoulder socket. So as we spin one in as far as we can, we're going to then open it up, and I want to externally spin that palm as high to the ceiling or beyond, and then going to the other side. Again, starting with the hands low. Notice how smooth is that spin of the right shoulder compared to the left shoulder. Is one side a little clunky, stiff, tighter? Are you not able to go as far? I'm feeling some stiffness in this right or my left shoulder, not getting quite as much internal, and external feels okay. Right shoulder feels pretty smooth. Now, as we're going back and forth, we can slowly start to ratchet our arms up a little higher, as long as we don't get into any kind of pinch or pain. And continuing to ratchet up higher. We'll bring, as we slowly inch the arms up to shoulder level. Once we get the shoulder level, we're now going to continue to, as we spiral in, we're going to continue to spiral in and allow that shoulder blade to roll over the top, getting us a little distorted in our spine, and then spiraling back and doing the same thing through the other side. At this point, I like to imagine that we're Stretch Armstrong and we're trying to reach and extend out and away, like we're trying to touch the walls out to the side in order to create more traction through the body. Again, notice how smooth does the right shoulder move compared to the left shoulder. And my right shoulder is very smooth. My left shoulder has a little clunk right there. Clunks, not so much clunky on the external. That's fairly normal. I have some stuff that goes on through that left shoulder from injury history along with my neck, but I got a good clunk in there today, a little bit more than normal. So I'm hoping that will smooth out as we move through the class. We'll go ahead and let the hands relax down. We're going to grab our staff. We're going to get a nice shoulder width grip on the staff, and I want to imagine that we're trying to bend or break the staff in two. And I want that bend to happen at the wrists. Elbows should be spiraling up, and shoulder blades packing down. We feel them sliding down the rib cage like you're trying to move them into your back pocket. So actively bending the staff like you're trying to break it in two, okay? Hands can stay down at the in front for starting, and we're going to get back into that crocodile breath, including with some pelvic tilts. So as we inhale into that belly, we're going to let the pelvis tilt forward so we get a nice big sway in the low back. As we exhale, drawing the navel in, we're scooping the pelvis underneath. You should feel that glute kind of engage and the core get a little tight as well. If you feel some tightness or sensitivity in that low back, then I want to make sure that we're avoiding pain and we're not moving into a significant pinch. So I want to find that kind of juicy area where it feels like a good stretch Doesn't feel painful. Be soft with it, especially if it's tight. Giving it about 5 to 10 reps, not pushing into pain. You should notice that your body gives you a little bit more range, allows that pelvis to move a little bit further, getting a little bit more mobility into that low back. I have a little bit of a pinch as I go, pelvis tilts forward and I'm going into lumbar extension. Got a little pinch on the right side, a little bit more than is usually there. On the next inhale, as we fill that belly up, as we exhale, scooping and drawing the navel in, we're now going to lift arms, pulling the elbows up towards the ears and beyond, only going as high as we can with the arms as we can maintain that scoop. If we start to lose that scoop and that rib cage sticks out and we get a sway in our back, then we're going too high. So I want to feel that scoop and pull. If you're only able to go so high, that's fine. We're squeezing into it slowly. Inhale, let the pelvis go back forward, big sway in the back. Exhale, scoop as we pull. With each one, we're seeing if we can squeeze those elbows a little further back without losing that core engagement and without going into pain. This can be 10 up to 20 nice, slow reps. Continue to keep that bend in the staff. You're actively trying to break the staff as you pull those elbows back. On the next one, as we pull, we're going to keep those shoulders pulled back into tension. And we're now going to elevate shoulders, reaching up to the ceiling, and then depressing the shoulders, pulling them back down towards your hips. Exhale as you push. Inhale as you pull. I want to keep the elbows actively straight on this. I don't want the elbows to bend as you pull down. Keep them actively extended. That pull is only coming from your shoulder blades. Sliding down the rib cage and then lifting up and reaching as high as possible. On the next reach, as we reach, we're going to stay reaching, and we're going to come back to our pulling those elbows back behind the ears as we scoop. Inhale going forward, exhale, draw that navel in, scoop, and draw the arms back. With the shoulder blades elevated, we should have a little bit more range that we're able to clear the elbows. Again, I don't want to force it, and I don't want to go into pain. We're going to move the staff now to behind the back. Palms are facing backwards, still continuing to bend or break the staff away from the body. So those elbow pits are still spiraling forward. Notice that as we spiral those elbow pits forward, that draws the shoulder blades down and back and opens up the chest. I don't want to be rounded back, shoulders rounded forward. I want to feel this nice open chest as much as possible. See if you can feel some stretchiness to the top front of the chest. Inhale into our crocodile breath. Exhale as we lift elbows up to the ceiling. Inhale lets it soften. Exhale, squeezing into it a little bit more. And as we're lifting, we're continuing to actively engage in that spiral of the elbow pit. So I'm continuing to try to spiral the elbow pit forward, which is going to continue to pull those shoulder blades back, opening up the chest as we lift. Nice, slow squeeze at the top. Make sure that we're not moving into pain or discomfort. Notice how does this feel on the right shoulder compared to the left shoulder. It's So one side feel a little tighter, a little stiffer, a little harder to get that range of motion in. Next, we're going to flip our palms to the opposite side of the staff. So palms are now facing forward. We're still bending the staff away from the body. So elbow pits are still moving forward, chest extended out, shoulder blades packed down and back. Everything else is the same. Nice inhale into that crocodile breath. Exhale, drawing the navel in as we lift. Continuing to spiral those elbow pits forward. Again, nice, slow squeeze at the top. Again, I want to notice, how do the shoulders feel, especially through the front of each shoulder on this particular one? Is it tighter, more restricted, more noticeable tension on one shoulder compared to the other shoulder? Good. We'll go ahead and set the staff off to the side. And now we're going to get, I want to keep the staff in our hands. I'm getting the wedge out, but we're not going to start with it. We're going to go through these movements without the wedge first, and then we're going to do the same thing with the wedge. So I'm getting a nice wide stance, and I want whichever leg we're starting with is going to be forward. So I'm starting with my right leg. I'm bringing that foot a little bit forward. I want to spread the ball of the foot and the toes wide as possible, and I want to feel grounded through the ball of the big toe all the way out to the ball of the pinky toe. We're going to lightly lift the heel off the floor, so there should just be a little bit of space. It can be as little space, just enough space for a piece of paper to slide underneath your heel. I don't want that heel to be high. I just want it barely off the floor. So from here, spread foot, grounded ball of the foot all the way across, pinky toe to big toe. We're going to start moving that knee in and out. I'm just rotating through from internal hip to external hip. But as I do so, I want to make sure that we're maintaining that grounded ball of the foot. So as that knee turns in, I don't want the pinky toe, ball of the pinky toe to lift off the floor. As that knee turns out, I don't want the ball of the big toe lifting off the floor. I need to maintain grounded contact. So as I roll my knee in, I want to make sure that I am pressing and grounding through the outside ball of the foot. As I turn out, I want to make sure that I'm pressing and grounding through the ball of the big toe. Now, as we're doing this, if you look down at your heel, when your knee turns in, your heel's turning out. And as your knee turns out, your heel's turning in. And since we have that ball of the foot grounded to the floor, what that means is we're literally wringing out the midfoot. Like a washcloth, we're rinsing it out. Let's go ahead and switch, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So light step forward, spread those toes wide, lightly lift the heel off the floor. Feel that grounded foot as we start to rotate that knee in to out. Again, maintaining pressure through the ball of the big toe and ball of the pinky toe throughout. And notice if one side feels stiffer, tighter, harder to keep that control. My right foot is more mobile than my left foot. It's easier to maintain a grounded ball of the foot. My left foot is stiffer. It tends to be stuck in a state of supination. So it's harder to maintain. I don't have as much mobility, especially internal. It's hard to keep that pinky toe grounded down. This is one of the reasons why I have to work on this is my left side tends to stay tight and stiff to support for excess mobility on the right side. largely related to my right knee. So now that we got those on both sides, we're now going to add the wedge in. So we'll come back to the first foot. So wide stance, slightly forward. Foot is straight. I am placing the wedge at a 45-degree angle to the ball of the big toe. I'm sliding that ball, the wedge, so that the wedge is underneath the ball of the big toe, ball of the second toe, and just a little bit under the ball of the third toe. Fourth and fifth are still on the floor. We're going to come right back to that knee wag. At this point, the heel can be on the floor or it can be lightly lifted as long as you're able to maintain grounded ball of the foot. But we're going to come back to everything else we did earlier. Knees wagging in, maintaining a grounding to the outside of the foot. Knee is rolling out, maintaining grounding through the ball of the big toe. Again, going back and forth. The wedge is placing the foot in a pre-stretch through the arch of the foot. So you will more than likely feel a bigger sensation of stretch within the foot as we go back and forth. Really work maintaining that groundedness through the entire forefoot, ball of the big toe all the way out to the ball of the pinky toe. After you do about 5 to 10 back and forth, we're going to stay on this side. We're now going to bring that back foot forward a little bit. I'm still wide, but now my back foot is forward. The foot on the wedge is behind me a little bit. I'm actively straightening that knee, reaching the heel to the floor, and then I'm going to let that knee soften, and we're pressing down through the ball of the foot, again, big toe to pinky toe, and pressing the heel up towards the ceiling, and then reaching the heel back down as we extend the knee, reaching that knee back like we're trying to touch the wall behind us, and going back and forth, driving that foot up, feeling that stretch through the arch of the foot into the big toe, and then actively reaching the heel down to the floor, actively reaching the back of the knee as far back like you're trying to touch the wall. The more you're able to extend that knee, you should feel a little bit of stretch through the front of the hip as well. After about 5 to 10 reps, we're going to switch. So coming back to left side, my right foot's a little bit forward. Wedge is going underneath at a 45-degree angle so that it's underneath the ball of the big toe, ball of the second toe, and a little bit under that third. Fourth and fifth are off. Coming back to that knee wag. Actually, sorry, that foot should be forward. So left foot is forward from the right foot. We'll switch that back in just a second. So I have a little bit more weight through that front leg. Forefoot is spread wide. Working on turning that knee in and out. Keeping that grounded nature through the ball of the foot. It's a lot harder for me on this foot. Again, this foot is stiffer, especially as I'm rolling in. Going in, I'm at a bigger stretch because I was already immobile in this direction. So this is really challenging my left foot. After 5 to 10 reps, we're going to take that back foot and step forward just a little bit. Actively reaching the knee back to the wall behind us, actively rooting the heel down into the floor. And then we're going to let that knee soften, plant through the ball of the foot, drive the heel up to the ceiling, and then reaching that heel back down as we actively straighten the knee. This is a lot stiffer, tighter. My mobility is a lot less on the big toe on my left side than it is on my right side. I'm not forcing it. I'm only working within the range that it feels comfortable. You know, up to that level 1, level 2 on a scale of 0 to 10, in that slight discomfort. Like it's not painful in the sense of it's in that level 3 or above, but it's not comfortable. So it's still on the pain scale. There's some big, you know, some significant, I wouldn't say they're big stretches. They're significant stretches, but they're very small muscles within the foot that I can feel. Good. All right. We're going to kick the wedge off to the side. We can set the staff down. And now we're going to get into our half kneeling position. So in half kneeling, this is where a chair can be a suitable replacement if you simply cannot place your knee to the floor. If putting your knee on the floor is causes too much irritation in the knee that makes pain, then we can either have lots of extra padding underneath the knee, or we can use a chair. I'm teaching this without the chair today. So in half kneeling, I want to have that back foot, that big toe is tucked underneath, and I want it tucked underneath as much as possible, as if we're going to drive through that foot going into a dead sprint. I want to feel that kind of level of like, I am engaged in that back foot. Knee is directly under hip, hip is under shoulder, shoulder is under the head. So I don't want to be leaning forward. I want to be nice and tall. You can always use your staff as a plumb line to kind of see, does that knee go through the hip, through the shoulder, and then to the head. From here, we're going to get into our breath again. Inhale into that belly. We're going to allow that bottom, that knee side hip to rotate forward. On our exhale, we're drawing that navel in and scooping. As I scoop, I want to feel that dig into the big toe. Inhale, we're seeing how much can we get that big sway in the back without going into pinch or pain. Exhale, draw that navel up and in as we scoop. Feel that big toe. Can you feel some stretch on the front of the hip? Each one we're trying to squeeze a little bit more, scoop into it. The more scoop we can get, we'll eventually start to feel that glute tightening up and contracting, because we're getting hip extension, which means we're also going to get glute contraction. After 5 to up to 10 reps, we're going to switch, do the same thing on the other side. With each of these movements, especially in the half kneeling position, it's it's helpful to pay attention to the differences one side to the other, especially at the big toe and the hip. As I get into this, my left big toe feels stiffer than my right does. That is not always the case. Today it feels a little bit excessively stiff. So that's an important assessment, because what's going on at the big toe is going to have an impact on the hips. So again, head over shoulder, over hip, over knee. Nice inhale into that belly, big sway in the back. Exhale, drawing navel up and in as we scoop. And I can feel I got less scoop on this side, at least so far. And by less scoop, I'm not feeling as much glute activation, but I feel a whole lot of tight in that ball of the big toe. Each one we're trying to squeeze into it a little bit more without forcing it. Sometimes we have to do a couple of rounds back and forth of some movements in order to get the mobility kind of back in place. The first round might just simply be trying to coat the joints with synovial fluid so that they move, slide, and glide a little bit better. Starting to get a little bit more hip extension. I'm starting to feel that glute activating, so I'm getting a little bit more range on my pelvic tilt. We'll go ahead and switch back to the other side. We're going to do the exact same thing for 5, and then we're going to add an element to it. So big toe is tucked and loaded again. Inhale into that belly, big sway in the back. Exhale, scoop. Second time around, it should feel a little bit more mobile, a little bit more easier to engage. So you might get a little bit deeper stretch. You might feel that contraction a little bit more. If so, continue to squeeze into it. Feel that contraction, feel that stretch. As long as we're not pushing through pain, we're not forcing it, we should be good. On the 5th one, as we scoop, we're now going to add a lunge, but I want to continue to actively scoop. As we lunge, we're going to lose our scoop, but I want to resist losing that scoop as much as possible in order to create a traction stretch. So exhale, scoop. Continue to actively scoop as we draw that scoop out, lunging forward. We're going to come back up, exhale, scoop, and draw it out again. I want to try to make sure that we're keeping head over shoulders over hips. As we scoop and move forward, hips are obviously going to move forward from the knees, but I don't want to lean forward. I want to keep everything else here in that plumb line. So again, if we have that staff going through hips, shoulder, and head, as we scoop, hips, shoulders, and head should remain in that same plumb line. And then we'll switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, get that big toe tucked and loaded. Starting with 5 pelvic scoops. Ooh, right off the bat, I got getting a little bit further into this left hip than I did on the previous reps. I can feel my glute, get a bigger stretch on the front of the hip. And on the 5th one, as we exhale, hold that scoop as we start to lunge and draw that scoop out slowly. As we come back up, re-engage the scoop. And again, nice, slow lunge. This one at side is much tighter, especially as I draw that lunge out. I have a very specific line, fascial line, that I can feel that tension. I'm also feeling it's pulling me out of my plumb line. So I got to really work to maintain head over shoulders over hips. This side is significantly tighter in this area, which is really helpful feedback. For me, this would be an area where I would look at possibly using the foam roller in order to mobilize my hip more and then come back to this movement in order to work the mobility. All right, switching back to the first side again. Still have that big toe tucked and loaded. We're still doing the same scoop, no more lunge. So as we scoop, we're now going to take the knee side, the knee that is on the ground, that hand is going to lift and elevate like you're trying to touch the ceiling. Inhale, fill up that belly. Pelvis tilts forward, big sway in the back. Exhale, scoop. And now we're dragging that scoop up to the ceiling. As we lift, I want to feel that lift moving up through the abdominal viscera. I want to see if we can feel that stretch on the front of the hip moving up. What I want to avoid is dropping my opposite shoulder. So I want that opposite shoulder to remain at the same height as we lift and elevate the other shoulder. I don't want it to drop lower. I don't want side bend on this. If that shoulder drops a little bit, that's okay, but we're trying to work to where we just get this extension through the lateral side of the body without flexing on the opposite side. After 5 to 10 reps, we're going to switch to the other side. Again, Big toe tucked and loaded. I want to maintain that relationship through that big toe and the hip. Inhale, scoop. Then nice lift and elevation. And man, this side is significantly tighter. It's tighter in the scoop. I already established that. But then adding the lift, oh man, it's even more tight. And I can feel that same area lifting up into that abdominal viscera. So I want to move into that slowly, non-forcefully. It should feel good and pleasant. It feels good and pleasant. As you squeeze into it, your body may give you a little bit more access to range, as long as it feels safe. If it feels safe, then we want to program safe movement into it. We do not want to be forceful. This is one of those areas that if you want to move without pain, you have to give your body an experience of movement that is pain-free. And so if you continue to push through your pain triggers, then you are going to continue to experience pain with your movement. Switch back to the first side again, still having that big toe tucked and loaded. We're still scooping, but now we're going to bring our arms across our chest so that each hand is on the opposite shoulder. This is just to help keep our shoulders square to one another. As we scoop, we're now going to rotate our shoulders as much towards the elevated knee as we can. We're trying to turn towards the wall at our side. Inhale, bringing it back forward. Sway in the back. Exhale, scoop. And then rotate. For the first 5 of these, allow your head to move with your shoulders. So I want the head to stay square so that as you're turning and looking at the wall to your side. Notice, where does it feel tight and restricted? In each one, we're really squeezing into that end range. Oh, and one last thing. Lower body. I want to make sure that as we turn, that knee is not turning with us. If anything, I want counter rotation in the lower body. I want the lower body holding fast in the opposite direction from where I am rotating to. Again, we're trying to get that squeeze through the mid-core. After 5, I want you to look at a point on the wall straight out in front of you. And so as you turn, your head stays focused on that point as your shoulders are still trying to turn towards the wall. This may elicit some different levels of stretch. You might feel it more in the upper back, in the neck. You might feel it more in the lower back or the hips. Or it may feel just as easy and smooth to do. You also may notice some vestibular. One might be a little bit more shaky and out of balance, and the other one might feel a little bit more stable. Go ahead and switch, doing the same thing on the other side. Again, big toe tucked and loaded. Inhale, belly opens up, sway in the back. Exhale, scoop as we turn head and shoulders towards the wall at our side. Again, I feel that this hip's starting to loosen up a little bit more, but I feel that initial tightness as I scoop, and it's more tight and restricted in the rotation as well. So I can feel how that hip is affecting mobility of my spine in relationship to it. My spine and it moves differently to my right hip than it does to my left hip. And that's a significant imbalance in gait mechanics. That will lead to some pain patterns, which I experience on the regular. After 5, eyes pinpoint on the wall straight out in front, holding those eyes, continuing to rotate into it. This movement is a really good one on my hip. I can feel this one opening up my hip more than any of the others have so far. Nice. All right. So we're going to come off our shin box, or our half kneeling, and into our shin box. I'm starting out left side shin box. My left hand is grounded down. Left knee is forward, and I kind of want that weight shifted more to the left side so that the right hip is off the floor. And we're going to start with some just simple knee openers. Actually, we're going to start with windshield wipers. So I want to go from one side. I'm grounded into my left shoulder. I'm going to lift both knees together. As I do so, right hand is finding the floor behind the hips. Feet stay in contact with the floor as we slowly windshield wiper to the right side. Shift the weight to that right hip. Grounded right palm, nice and tall. Feel your hips. Feel your back. Feel your spine. Notice how, and we're going to go back and forth. So as we're going back and forth, we're shifting back, nice slow spin through the hips, getting nice and tall. As we go back and forth, notice how do you move in one direction compared to the other? How does one side of your shin box feel compared to the other? As we move, I'm coming back to my first side. As I get tall, I want to feel that back hip lift and scoop into this position. See if you can feel some stretch through the front of that hip. Can you feel some tightening and contracting through the glute? And then we're going to reach that hip down as we find the floor with our palm. Slow spin across to the other side. As we come up, we're lifting that back hip and scooping it forward, feeling for that stretch through the front of the hip. So as we're going side to side, notice if one side of your shin box feels easier, less tightness, less tension. It's easy to sit up tall and control. And as you come to the other side, do you have more tightness and tension in the hip? Do you feel your body kind of wants to lean more? It's harder to sit up tall in it. As I come to my left side shin box, it feels really easy. I can get that scoop of the pelvis. I have some tightness and tension, but for the most part, this side feels easy. When I come to the left side, right as soon as those knees start to move down to the floor, I'm feeling that tightness through that front of the left hip. As I scoop, bring it forward, I really feel that tightness. And it's a little harder for me to sit up. My body wants to lean. So this left hip is preventing mobility into my spine, going all the way up to the opposite side shoulder. So these are important assessment points as far as determining balance in the body. Now we're going to start to add some new elements. We're continuing to go side to side. As I lift that hip up, we're now going to do some knee openers. That back knee, we're going to lift it up towards the ceiling. As we exhale, inhale, bringing it back down, and then transitioning all the way across to the other side. Getting nice and tall, and then opening up that knee to the ceiling. Again, nice, slow back and forth. As you're opening up your knee, one side and then going to the other side. Notice how high does the right knee open up and lift? How tight does it feel? Are you able to get more range of motion on it compared to the left side? Or maybe you get less. Maybe you got more range on the left side and less on the right. My left side feels tighter, especially through that same area. I don't get quite as high. Although, with all the other hip mobility, it's actually a little higher than it normally is when I first do this movement in the morning. As we even out, that was a good one there. Coming back to our first side, I want to come back to our scoop actively scooping into it, kind of locking into that scoop. And now we're going to add in some rotation. Imagine you got a piece of bread and you want to share that bread with somebody right to the left of you through that knee, reaching and extending the elbow and the fingers. Inhale brings it all the way in and across to the other side. Scoop that hip, lock into that hip, and then add in nice reach and rotation. Similar to our half kneeling, as I get that scoop, I want to feel that stretch on the front, and then as I add the rotation, I want to feel that stretch get drawn up. I want to feel traction move up through the spine, maybe all the way up into the shoulders. And notice how is the range of motion on this on the left side compared to the right side. On my right side shin box, reaching with my left hand, the hip is tight, but also as I get into this rotation, there's some definite restriction that is greater on this side than it is on the other side. Again, all of these are really important assessment points. If we want to move with balance, we have to be able to assess where we are moving without balance. If you don't know where your balance is missing in your body, you will not be able to feed it back in. Get one more side to side. Hopefully you're feeling it starting to open up, giving you a little bit more space to move. Once we're back to our starting side, we're now going to get into our folds. So I want to continue to scoop that back hip, but now we're freeing both hands and we're simply getting a nice reach, keeping the spine tall. I want to make sure that we're not dropping the head or dropping the chest straight down. Spine stays tall. Nice. Slide the hands as far forward as you can. Inhale, coming back up. Nice slow transition as we move across to the other side. Scoop that back hip. Nice reach, both hands reaching evenly. Now where we want to reach through is we can be a little bit more exploratory. So as I get into my shin box and scoop that back hip, I can reach straight through the shins. I can reach more straight. I can turn and reach through the knee. I can reach back behind the knee, or I can go against the grain. So all of those are available. Whatever you do on one side, it's important to do the same thing on the other side for the purpose of assessment, but it's also useful and valuable for the purpose of mobility to explore a little bit. So be a little playful, because where you go the most is where you're going to have movement most available. When you get off those lines that you normally do and you start exploring new territory, you're going to find some discoveries of tightness and tension that you may not have known were there. So go slow, go easy, but be exploratory. And if you find a spot that feels tight, especially if it's tight on one side and not the other, spend a few reps going back and forth through that area, one side and then the other. See if you can get them to even out a little bit more. I like to do a lot of reps with the folds. So as we're getting into it, we're going to start to open up our angle of our hips, letting that back leg slide open a little bit more. Getting into our reach. Let that leg slide back as we transition across, and then sliding that back leg for the other side into that same position. By opening up that shin box, that will elicit some more mobility feedback of the hips. As I slide my right leg back, right hip feels pretty free. This actually feels pretty easy. As I come to my right side and I slide that left hip back, there's that tightness and tension. Very specific, very localized. So I have a very clear idea of what pattern my body is holding tension in, how it's related to to supination in my left foot, and how it's affecting movement in my hips and my spine. We'll continue to keep that leg opening up more and more until we get closer and closer to what we would consider a yoga class pigeon pose. I don't want to focus on the end range of that pose. I'm more concerned with kind of discovering where I have mobility on one side and not on the other. And where I don't have mobility on one side, that's where I want to put a little bit more reps, soft reps, moving into it softly, safely, non-forcefully. Can we get that side that is less mobile to start to have some, to remobilize? Can we get some range of motion back into it? And if we can, then we want to give it lots of repetition so that we can feed the neurology that supports that mobility. Mobility without neurology is not mobility, it's just temporary. Good. All right, so we're now going to come all the way down to our back. Both feet are going to be flat to the floor. Again, I want to come back to having a nice solid tripod foot. I want to feel the toes spread out, ground the ball of the foot, just like we did when we were doing our foot mobility, but also keep the heels pressed into the floor. We're coming back into our breath, doing pelvic tilts. So inhale, feel that belly lift up to the ceiling so that we get that big sway in the back as the pelvis tilts forward. Exhale, drawing our navel into the spine as we scoop the pelvis. I don't want to press into the feet, at least not to start with. We're going to add the feet in a moment. I want all the movement to be generated from the core. So as you inhale, you're inhaling into the belly. And as you exhale, your belly button is pressing down like a thumb, pushing into your spine to push your spine down into the floor. Can you feel some stretch without pain associated with that inhale? Maybe through the abdominal wall or into the low back. As you exhale, can you feel your low back flatten out onto the floor as you scoop? Maybe you get some stretch in that low back if that low back is tight. On the next inhale, as we exhale, we're going to start to add our feet. So as you scoop, drawing that navel in, I now want to peel your spine off the floor, starting at the sacrum. So nice tripod feet will be engaged. You're scooping and you're continuing to scoop so that the sacrum peels off the floor, lifting up. And I want to lift each vertebrae up one at a time. So L5 lifts up, but the L4 continues to touch. L4 lifts up, but the L3 touches. L3 lifts, and so on until we get all the way up into this full hip bridge position. But I want that rib cage down, scooping into it. Then we're going to let each vertebrae down one at a time. As we inhale, filling that belly up, lifting us into a sway back. Exhale, navel presses into the floor, and then peeling each vertebrae up one at a time. We'll do good 5 to 10 slow breaths. Inhale, getting us to the floor, extended with our spine pulled, or sway in the back. Exhale, scooping, peeling the spine, getting full extension at the top. The more extension we get at the top, the more we should feel the glutes contracting and tightening up. really scoop into it will help contract the glutes even more. On the next one, as we exhale and we get to the top, we're going to stay at the top. I want to keep those hips as high as we can. We're going to come back to our breath with tilts, but we're keeping our hips high. So we're going to inhale, pelvis is going to tilt forward. This will get the rib cage to flare. We're going to get that sway in the back. And then as we exhale, we're drawing the navel in and we're scooping into it. We can do 5 to 10 breaths in this position. The higher you keep your hips elevated, so that all your hips are doing are tilting, rotating in this elevated position, you should start to feel those glutes fire up, especially by the 5th or 10th breath. I really want to work on actively scooping into it as much as possible to feel as much of that glute contraction as possible. After 5 to 10 breaths, we'll slowly bring the hips back down. We're going to go ahead and make our big C shapes with our hands. We're going to place those hands around the abdominal wall, below the rib cage and above the hip bone. We're coming back to our crocodile breath. Nice inhale. Feel that abdominal wall pushing out and away in all directions. Exhale. Draw that navel up and into the spine. Clench your hands down lightly to create more resistance for that next inhale. Slow inhale. This can be a 5 up to 8 second count inhale and exhale so that you can really feel that inflation of the abdominal wall. As you exhale, make sure your shoulders are nice and soft and relaxing and they're not holding tension. And start to notice, where does that breath move well? And where does that breath feel like it's not moving as well, especially in the side body and the low back? We're in a different position than when we started with the crocodile breath. Crocodile breath will be harder in the standing position, especially since we had not done any mobilization work yet. So I expect that you're able to feel a little bit more expansion in your breath now than you did at the beginning of the class, because we've done some good mobility work with breath work, and we're in an easier postural position in order to access the breath. We can go ahead and let the arms relax down to our side with the palms up. Feel the shoulders soften to the floor. We'll get a few more nice deep inhales. Now we're going to let those breaths come up into our chest and ribs. Same idea of feeling that inflation up, out through the sides and into the upper back. On the exhale, feel any tension that you're holding in the body melt off onto the floor. Your next inhale, we're breathing into any tension. You can use that breath to kind of explore, where does it feel tight and restricted? Breathing into that space softly to see if you can get it to move and expand. And then on the exhale, any tension that you're breathing into, we're allowing that tension to melt off to the floor. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and very slowly sit back up. Before coming to a stand, make sure you're not dizzy or lightheaded.